Oh my goodness, what have I done? I woke up beside a famous pop star, and do you know what the first thing that came into my mind? My best friend is going to kill me. I know you're probably wondering, so I'll just start telling the story. My name is Ella, and I'm a daycare teacher. I teach kids 4 to 5 years old, and I love my job. I don't have a family because I grew up in an orphanage, and being surrounded by kids makes me feel so happy and alive. I do have a best friend though. Her name is Rachel. She's the only family I have. I'm lucky because her family treats me as their own. But one day, something happened that ruined our friendship. I was so devastated. Do you believe that people do not remember what they're doing when they're drunk? Yeah, I don't believe that either. I think that you still have at least some control even if you're drunk. But I guess I was wrong. It all happened at the birthday party of my best friend Rachel. Rachel is obsessed with her childhood friend who turned into a famous pop star, Daniel. She wanted to celebrate her birthday at his lake house 2 hours away from the city, and I do not think it is a good idea. Maybe because I'm not really a party person and I prefer intimate gatherings. Also, I know her motivation is backwards. She wanted to use Daniel's lake house because she's got this idea that when he finally arrives at 12 midnight, she would confess her feelings for him. And she actually thinks that he'll feel the same way about her. And then they will have a happily ever after. Don't get me wrong, I want her to be happy. And I don't know why I do not like that idea. Maybe I'm just afraid that I will be left alone when that happens. Or maybe I just don't want to see her making a fool of herself. But anyways, I decided to support, like always. On the day of the party, we had a few friends come over. There was dancing, drinking, party games, and so on. I'm glad everyone was having a really great time. I looked for Rachel because she was nowhere to be found. And then I found her in one of the rooms where she is staring at a beautiful royal blue dress that she said she'll be wearing at midnight. For what? For her special moment with Danielle, of course. I'm not gonna deny it, I wanted to roll my eyes, but I love her too much. I really don't want her to get hurt. I asked Rachel to come out of the room and join the people who came all the way from the city just to celebrate with her. I'm keeping everything in order, I don't want anything to go wrong. And I'm also wishing for Daniel to come here early so that Rachel's wish would finally come true. One of our friends gave us a shot glass and poured drinks. I don't really drink, but I gave in for just one shot since this is Rachel's night. And that is the last thing I remember. I heard Rachel's voice saying, "One shot and she's out." Well, yeah, that is me. Next thing I know, I woke up beside the famous pop star, Daniel, in his bed. And the weirdest thing for me is, I was wearing Rachel's blue dress. I woke Daniel up and asked him immediately, "What happened?" He stood up, put on his shirt, and opened the curtain for some light, then sat down on the couch and said, "Oh, you really do not remember?" I really do not have any idea what is going on. I asked him if he knows where my phone is. All I wanted to do was call Rachel to ask if she has any idea what happened and why the heck am I wearing her dress? And how come I'm in the city? Daniel started narrating what happened, and I couldn't believe the craziness that took place last night. He said that he arrived at 12 midnight very quietly. He did not enter the front door because he did not want to attract a lot of attention. He said that the party was fun as it was anyway. Then he immediately went to his room to freshen up so he could join the party and look for Rachel. But that was when he saw me. We've never really met before, and at first he thought that I was Rachel. But then I introduced myself and very drunkenly said, "Hey you, Rachel is waiting for you. She's sad you didn't come." Then he just laughed. I just had a shower and I was having a hard time zipping my dress up, so I asked him, "Can you zip me up?" And so he did. And then he said I jumped out of the window because I was narrating some children's storybook and I claimed that I could fly. He followed me and saw me unconscious. My head was bleeding, so without getting too much attention, he brought me into his pickup car and decided to drive me to the hospital. While on the way, he was hoping that my head injury was not serious. When we finally arrived at the hospital, the staff got me into a stretcher and they quickly gave me anesthesia and stitches. After a briefly short while, I woke up and I asked where the party was. I guess I was still high with the meds. They said I removed my IV and I ran outside the hospital. Daniel says he called someone to settle the bill because he needed to follow me right away. He went outside to look for me, then he saw me dancing in the middle of the street, causing cars to stop, and got freaked out. Daniel carried me and brought me into the side street, and then I complained that I was so hungry and thirsty. He drove me to the nearest convenience store to buy me some water, and as he was getting water and food for me, I opened almost all of the chips and cookies in the stall and ate them. He apologized to the owner of the store and paid for all of the damages. And then he lost sight of me again. But to his horror, he saw me dancing at the top of a police car. "Ella, come down now," he said in a panic mode. He was able to get me down, but I started throwing stones everywhere while laughing. I don't know why I acted that way, but the way he told the story, it seemed like I was being really crazy. Then he said I threw a stone at the window of a police car, which the police eventually saw. Daniel came to the rescue and apologized. He also promised to settle everything. The police recognized him and they requested a selfie. Good thing that he has so many fans. But then, one unfortunate thing happened. I threw up directly at the police officer's uniform. Daniel grabbed me and drove away as fast as he could. He checked if we were being chased by the police car or not, and he was able to breathe when he realized that they did not follow us. Then I told him that I want to throw up again. He stopped at a nice spot and helped me while I was throwing all of my internal organs out. Then he took care of me. He gave me some water and a tablet for the hangover. He asked if I was doing okay. I said, "I want to lie down." At almost 2 a.m., we were lying down at the back of his pickup car. We were watching the stars and talking about each and everything. He said that I was still drunk at this point, but I was beginning to sober up. He told me how I kept on asking him about his love life and making him admit that he's a womanizer. I don't really remember that part, although I kind of remember the stars in the wind. Or maybe it's the stars in my head right now because it kind of still hurts. And so I asked, "How did we end up here in the city?" "You said you wanted to sleep in a comfortable bed. That's how," he said. He explained that he tried to drive me back to the lake house so he could explain to Rachel and the rest of my friends what happened to me. But then there was a car accident on the way back, so he just decided to go back to the city and put me in his bed. I said thank you and I apologized for all the trouble I've caused him. I told him that, please know that the drunk me is not the real me. My only life is my kids, and I'm happy living like that. Kids? Do you have kids? Are you married? I said no and no. I'm not married, and I do not have kids. The kids I'm referring to are my students. And to my surprise, he let out a huge sigh. Then he said that he should be the one to thank me because he had so much fun. It was such a long time since he had a break, and our night was very interesting to him. I freshened up and I asked him to help me get out of the building because I have a lot of things to settle. There were a lot of people outside his condo building because the news broke that Daniel went home with a girl. And it was such a scandal. Good thing is, his security team helped me get out of the building without anyone noticing me. I went home and Daniel asked some people to get my things from his lake house. After a few hours, I got my phone back. I tried to call Rachel again and again, but she didn't answer. I tried to get some sleep, and then in the afternoon I tried to call Rachel again so I could tell her everything, but of course, she didn't answer. I requested to meet her at our favorite pizza place in a text. It broke my heart when I saw her crying when I told her everything. She was so mad at me. She said that I stole a lot of good moments that she dreamt of having with Danielle. And then she asked, "Why does it have to be you?" I'm sorry, I was drunk and high on the meds. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I asked her what happened when she left me in the room. Daniel told me his side of the story, but I don't really know what happened before he arrived. Rachel said she left me in the room because I said I would like to take a shower. I insisted to be left alone because no one was attending the guests. And that must be the time when Danielle saw me dressing up. I was so sad because he didn't come to my party. And I was looking for you because I needed someone to talk to, but you were nowhere to be found, she said. Now Rachel knows that he came, but he took the wrong princess. I apologized again and again, and I tried to make it clear that what happened was not my intention. But Rachel was really angry with me. She even told me, "I don't want to see your face again, you traitor!" She added, "I do not believe you cannot remember anything. I know you took advantage of the moment." "That is so not true," I yelled, but she already walked out. I went home sad. I lost my friend Rachel. She was my only family. I'm hoping that she would come to her senses and forgive me, but I know that would not be possible as of the moment at least. Monday came and an unknown number kept on calling me. When I answered, I was surprised that it was Danielle. "Whatever happens, do not go out today or even watch the news," he said. But I could not do that. I cannot skip school because my kids would miss me, and I would miss them for sure. Now that I don't have Rachel in my life, I definitely need the love of my students. I did not answer Daniel's calls when I arrived at school, though I wondered how he got my number. Well, I guess he's got connections. Or maybe he got it when his staff delivered my phone yesterday. I need to get out and proceed to have a normal day and forget about all the Daniel stuff right now. But then when I arrived at school, the principal asked to meet me before I proceeded with my class. And to my surprise, she was firing me. "You're not gonna be a great role model for the kids, I'm sorry," she said. She opened the news blog that she was watching, and some vlogger documented what happened that night with Daniel because, of course, he's got fans everywhere. It was already trending. It has everything from the moment I was in the hospital, my silliness at the convenience store, and the way I was dancing like a fool at the top of a police car. When we stopped so I could throw up, and even more. But I think people assumed that we were being naughty in the dark. And the finale was Danielle carrying me into his condo unit when I fell asleep in his car. Goodness, that was such a scandal. Tonight, I know Daniel is going to have a big concert, and this might affect him too. I have no family, so no one is going to be compromised with this situation. Good thing that Rachel is not connected to me right now, because her name might also be ruined. For a moment, I was so happy that I was in this crazy situation and not Rachel. I do not want her to be humiliated. Daniel made a big announcement on social media right before his concert. I went home and watched it. Please do not assume anything. The woman that I was with the other night is a great person, and I hope this world would accept her as the love of my life. Ella, if you're watching this, Please, I beg you to forgive me for the trouble my world is causing you. That's what Daniel said on social media. It quickly went viral along with the clip of us being together. Good thing that no one knows where I live, or I would not be able to walk out of my house anytime. I decided that I should go to Daniel's concert. I watched from a distance and I texted him to meet me up at the rooftop of my condo unit so we could talk like two adults and iron things out. When he arrived, he smiled at me and it made me feel better on the inside. Well, his smile kinda calms me down. He said, "What I said was true. I fell for you that night, Ella." I do not know what to say to that, I answered. I told him that he knows nothing about me. I also let him know that I do not have a family, and the only family I have right now is angry with me. I also told him that I lost my job. The last thing I need at the moment is another complication, so if you really want to be part of my life right now, you will accept whatever I can offer, and right now, that is friendship. Daniel agreed to be in my life on my conditions. He even helped me rebuild my life. Even if Daniel was busy, he always made sure that he's got time for me. He also tried to help me patch things up with Rachel, but she still has not forgiven me. Her family has also turned its back on me, but to be honest, I understand. Few weeks later, Daniel built a foundation for homeless kids because he would like to share his blessings. He made me the project manager and I was so happy to finally have a purpose again. I enjoyed helping kids and it felt like I have a big family. I also appreciate the effort of Daniel because no matter how busy he was, he always made sure he had time to visit the foundation. Another year has passed and Daniel never left my side, although our relationship was never clear to him. With his world, I know he's got a lot of temptations around him, but he always says he's only got his eyes fixed on me. I'm willing to wait, he always says. One day he surprised me with a gift that made me fall for him even more. He said that he asked some people to start a project of building a daycare center. He said that this is his gift for me and that I don't need to pay him anything back. As of the moment, I have a lot of students and it's making my heart smile. I am so glad that my life is right on track. A year has passed and I found myself missing Rachel so much. I hope by this time she has already forgiven me. Then I saw my email and there was a wedding invitation. Oh my god, Rachel is getting married, I told Daniel. I told him that she's inviting us to her wedding, so that must be a good thing. That night, Rachel called me and invited me to her bachelorette party. Daniel said, "Careful with the alcohol, do not drink," he jokingly said. The bachelorette party was very decent. We were able to talk and she said she found someone after what happened with Daniel. She realized that she was obsessing over Daniel too much that she forgot to have a life and meet other people. And now she met the love of her life and she's getting married next week. She asked me to be her maid of honor, and I said, I hope it's not yet too late. Of course I said yes, and she showed me the dress and it really looked beautiful. She also asked for forgiveness because I should have been more forgiving. I now understand that you did not plan any of it, she said. She also said that if that did not happen, then she wouldn't have met her husband-to-be. I'm so happy for Rachel. She's finally gonna have her happily ever after. On the day of the wedding, I had Daniel as my date. He gladly offered to sing at the wedding reception. When the other band was playing, he asked me to dance with him. And then he asked me $1 million question. Ella, will you be my girlfriend? He asked. If I say yes, will you get me a drink? I jokingly said. We laughed so hard, and then we shared a tight hug.
Hi, my name is Selena. I'm 19 years old, and I'm just crazy about basketball. I follow all the sports news, the star players, and the league statistics. I know the names of all the famous players around the world. My friends were amused by this because their interests ran more towards makeup, fashion, singers, and movie stars. I thought those girl things were just outright vain, shallow, frivolous, and downright silly to tell the truth. The college's basketball team coach was forced to take leave due to a chronic illness, leaving the team without a coach. Due to my high school reputation and widely recognized basketball expertise, I was asked if I wanted to serve as the basketball team's temporary coach. I had always dreamed of someday becoming a coach for a famous basketball team, so I jumped at the opportunity. School leagues presented opportunities for players to show what they've got and maybe get scouted by a professional league team. It was also my chance to start as a college basketball coach. By studying the opposing team's previous games, I analyzed their strategies and learned their strengths and weaknesses. I was able to excel and drive my team to an undefeated streak of winnings. We won the college league championship. I was selected to train a team in a professional league with another famous coach. It was an incredible opportunity for me to up my game a notch. During this time, I met an opposing team's coach named Jacob, who was something of a genius when it came to winning basketball strategies. He shared the same dreams as mine. He bragged that his team was better than mine. Well, I couldn't ignore the gauntlet he threw at my feet, so I challenged him to a game. My team against his, in the upcoming season, and may the best team win. If my team won, he would acknowledge me as a superior coach, and vice versa. The season began, and both our teams began beating all our opponents. I used these victories to hone my coaching skills to the next level. Both our teams were undefeated until the day we were to face each other in a championship game. The game began, and both teams played hard. We stayed closely matched the entire game. In the final few seconds of play, one of their players got past our defense. He scored a buzzer beat. I was crushed and began to cry, but my team's fans in the stadium broke into a loud applause. They began chanting my name, acknowledging that I have given them a great competitive, entertaining game. Jacob came over to me. I figured he came to gloat, but instead, he got down on one knee and presented me with an engagement ring. I was in shock. The stadium cheered even louder. I may have lost the game that day, but for some reason, I felt like a winner.
Hey, my name is Monica, and in 5th grade, we went to the Orlando Science Center for a field trip. I was excited for multiple reasons. One, I was a huge science lover. Two, my teacher was an absolute bully whom I hated, and luckily could get away from for most of the day. She would make up lies and get me in trouble with my parents, and then smirk the next day when she saw bruises on me. But lastly, I had found out that the day before my crush and I were going to be in the same group of 7, guided by a parent known for not caring too much about what you do as long as you don't die. My crush Sam was absolutely beautiful, a sweet boy who was blessed well by puberty over the summer. His shoulders wide, his waist slim, his hair was a brilliant ginger shade, complemented by his jade green eyes and cute dark freckles, carefully painted across the bridge of his nose. He was quick on his feet and just as quick to make a joke. And let's be honest, who can resist a cute redhead, boy or girl? Not me. We get off the bus, and Sam and I immediately dive into the beauty that was the Orlando Science Center. I had no idea he was a fellow nerd. We were casual friends, enough not to make things awkward, but not enough to know much about each other. So discovering he adored science was great for me. I remember messing with pulley systems with him, venturing through the human body floor and making terrible puns along the way. He rubbed his hands along the giant ball of electricity on one floor and immediately rubbed it on my head to try and get my hair to stand on end. And I couldn't help but notice how his hand stayed on my collarbone a bit too long after. Lunch came and I looked at my stomach was fluttering the entirety of the trip, and I could even fathom eating with how jittery it was. Mrs. Sargent, my bitch-ass teacher, demanded to know why I wasn't eating, and was unsatisfied by I'm not hungry. You won't get to leave the room until you eat something. everything. The planetarium is next. You better eat if you want to go and see the movie, she sneered, and stuck to her words, forcing me to down the raisins. I hate them, and chocolate milk. I'm lactose intolerant, but finally I was freed, back to an excited Sam. Now, for anyone who does not know what a planetarium is, it's a giant dome-shaped theater. Imagine walking outside, looking up, and the sky was playing A Bug's Life or something. It was just like that. It was absolutely beautiful. This trip included a showing about the stars above, the constellations, light pollution, all the fun facts. Sam was a huge space lover, planned on working at NASA eventually, and succeeded last time I checked Facebook, and was entirely geeked out about this showing. I was inspired by his love for it and became excited as well. I simply wanted to watch him fawn over the showing. It's too cute when people do that. We found our seats and we were immediately plunged into a darkness I didn't even know was possible. I sat back in the uncomfortable chair, encased in the crazy spins and stomach-lurching turns as the show shot us through the cosmos. The narrator had a smooth, deep voice similar to the great Morgan Freeman himself. But it couldn't trump the soft squeaks my crush expelled as he whispered space facts to me, the cool tip of his nose touching my blushing cheek. He was so close, going on about black holes, tying it all off with an excited, "Isn't it amazing?" whispered in my ear. I mumbled an agreement, my stomach full of butterflies, threatening to burst through the show and disrupt everything. Was it too hot in there, or was it just me? I finally worked up the courage to look at Sam, noses touching. The scene around us lit with thousands of stars, gently illuminating his face, yet reflecting brilliantly in his eyes. After a moment he whispered, "I think it's beautiful." And I could tell he was not talking about the stars. He moved, millimeters being covered at a snail's pace closer to my mouth. This was going to be my first kiss, and I couldn't imagine a better scene as a kid. Just me, a cute boy, and a sky full of stars. I was so excited. I could feel nerves build up in my throat and the butterflies in my stomach. Wait, no, those were not nerves. Instead, I proceeded to retch, causing Sam to lean away before vomiting in his fucking lap. The heat, fluttering stomach, all the beginning of a stomach bug, which was given fuel when I ate lunch. I vomited in my crush's lap, guys. I honestly hope Sam doesn't remember me like ever. To those asking, I remember this in detail because not only was it so goddamn traumatic, but it was one of the best days of my life as well. It ignited a love for science for me, plus, who could forget an entire day you got to spend with your crush? And yeah, I stalked him on Facebook to see what he does now. Nothing too major, if I remember. He actually simply works at the NASA Visitors Center, helping hosting school trips and stuff, but he still sort of followed his dream.
Some people live their lives not fully appreciating what others do for them. They start taking things for granted, thinking that that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Parents sacrifice a lot for their children, and when the children appreciate and try their best in life, that would be worth more than any words can ever describe. My name is Megan, and I hope to inspire you with my story. I lived with my father and my sister Marlene after the death of my mother, who died from an illness. Though I was only 18 at the time, I became responsible for taking care of the whole family. I did everything for them: cooking, cleaning, washing. My father was a great man, and he did his best to make us happy. I supported both my sister and my father. We faced everything together. There was one more person in my life, my neighbor, Dave. We practically grew up together, and our dreams grew with us. He knew everything about our circumstances and supported me often. He proposed to me and we got engaged. Dave chose a flat near my family so we would be close to them. That was very thoughtful of him. We got married and started our lives. I was determined to finish college, and Dave helped me in every way that he could. He proved to me every day how responsible and considerate he was. One day, while cleaning the house, my heart started beating rapidly, and I couldn't breathe well. I was barely able to call out to Dave, who came immediately when he heard me cry for help. I had had this symptom before when I was younger, but I never told my father because I didn't want to worry him. Dave took me to the hospital, where a doctor said that I had a serious heart condition. And not just that, I was pregnant too. Pregnancy and a heart condition do not make a good combination, so we had to choose between the baby's life and mine. My father and Dave asked me to abort the child, though they tried really hard to persuade me. I resolutely refused. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy. They were all so worried for my safety. My father and Marlene left their flat to come and live with me, and Dave cut back on his working hours to stay with me. When the day came, they took me to the hospital. The doctor checked the condition and said that it was too serious, that I wouldn't be able to survive the childbirth. My family and I were shocked. I held Dave's hand and told him that I was strong enough to make it. Dave hugged me and cried. I was so afraid, but I did my best to hide it. I said to my baby, "I'm trying the best I can. I'm fighting so that both of us could have a life. Know that I love you, and I know that you'll grow up to be very successful, but you'll also be caring and kind."
How I found out that I was adopted was both odd and dramatic. Odd because I found out in a hotel room while the plumbing at home was being fixed. Dramatic because, well, finding out the parents you've known for 14 years weren't really your parents, tears were bound to ensue. There were clue signs when I was a kid that I wasn't related to anyone I grew up with. First of all, although people told me I looked like my parents, I never really saw the resemblance. Second, prior to my first birthday, I didn't really have any pictures of me as a toddler. And third of all, though you might think this is irrelevant, but I think it plays a part. I'm an only child. Either I was just oblivious, or that I was already so part of the family that it didn't really matter. When I was in grade 2, we learned about baptism in religion class. I went to a Catholic school and religion was part of the curriculum. Our teacher began that lesson by giving us this assignment. Bring your baptismal certificate and a baptismal photo to class. The next day, I was the only kid in class who didn't bring either one. It wasn't like I didn't try. I asked my grandmother where they were because I needed them for class. I remember a brief look of panic flash before her face. So I just shrugged it off. "I don't know where they are," she said. "I'll call your mom and ask her." My parents were working abroad in America at the time. I grew up with my grandparents in a tiny island in the Philippines. My grandfather passed away when I was 4, and ever since it was my strict but caring grandmother and a string of maids raising me. Summers were the month I looked forward to the most because it meant two things: my birthday and my parents visiting. I was your typical Filipino child with overseas parents. So when my grandmother got off from a long-distance call with my mother and told me that they had my baptismal certificate and photos with them in New York, I wasn't suspicious. I simply restated what she told me to my teacher, who had me look over a classmate's baptismal certificate and photos. When I was a little bit older, I had a dream. I'm the type of person who remembers her dreams. So this particular dream had stayed with me for so many years. Even now, I still remember it. I was at home in the living room, playing with my favorite dollhouse. A woman entered the picture. I remember a mass of dark curly hair and a blue dress. I didn't know her, but at the same time, she looked so familiar. She plopped down on the floor next to me and began to play with me. And then she told me that she was going to take me away. Why? Because she was my mother. I woke up then, was confused for a few minutes, but then I shrugged it off. I must have been watching too much of my grandmother's dramatic soap operas. My father returned to the Philippines to help raise me when I turned 10. I was never particularly close to him anyways. I didn't talk to him much and I avoided spending time with him. Looking back now, I realized that I gave him such a hard time when he was only trying to be a good dad. I have to admire him for never giving up. In those years, I slowly became a daddy's girl, and I still am. He's serious and strict, but has his funny moments. My mother remained in New York, but now tried her very best to visit twice a year rather than once. In sixth grade, again in religion class, we were taught that names were important. They gave us our identities. What did our names mean? How did our parents come to name us? We looked up our names in a dictionary. Mine meant woman of purity. Another definition said simple. That night, I asked my grandmother to call my mother long distance so I could ask her why she gave me my name. Why did you choose my name? I asked her, pencil poised on the page of my religion notebook, ready to take notes. Why did I choose your name? She repeated. Yeah, I replied. I looked up my name and it said woman of purity and simplicity. So why did you choose my name? She was silent for a moment before saying, I don't know. Let me call you back. We said goodbyes and we hung up. I thought that was odd, but I shrugged it off. It was no big deal. If you're still interested in how I found out I was adopted, or why did my mom choose my name, stay tuned for the second part. It all happened on my last holiday. It was a terrible experience. It was the worst holiday I have ever had. Me and my friend Renee, we decided to go to New Zealand. We were saving money for a very long time to go on this trip. It was our dream to go to the land of the Lord of the Rings. We had made reservations for flight at the end of July, and from that moment on, everything went wrong. It turned out that the flight was reserved for only one person, simply because a woman at the travel agency didn't understand us very well. I managed to reserve a flight, but a different one, so we couldn't go together. But I thought that it was not a big deal. My friend flew a few hours after me. I was going first. When I arrived at the airport, I was very happy because that meant that my holiday has just started and that nothing else could happen. And I was mistaken. When the hour of my flight was coming, I queued up to the custom clearance. My passport was right, and the next thing I had to do was to go through the metal detector. When I was passing through, it started to beep. I was so scared. I was taken aside immediately, and I felt like a thief. It was terrible. The custom officer had taken me to another room and she told me to undress. I tried to explain that I had a belly ring and maybe it was the cause of the beeping, but she didn't want to listen. I had to undress. They took my clothes somewhere else, and I was standing alone in the middle of the room. I was shocked and stressed. The woman came back after about 5 minutes, which seemed to be ages for me. She gave me back my clothes, but I was not allowed to put them on. She checked me one more time with a small metal detector, which was obviously beeping in front of my belly ring. Of course, the custom officials went through all of my things, but they didn't find anything. I was late for my flight, so I had to wait for another one. My friend was supposed to meet me at the airport, and it was me who should be waiting for her. She was terrified that I was not there, but fortunately she decided to wait. After that horrible flight, we met at the airport and we went to our hostel. It turned out that we expected something different, but it was not that bad, and we were too tired to look for something else. New Zealand is the most beautiful country I have ever seen, and we loved everything about it. The people, their customs, their food, basically everything, and the entire environment. We spent 3 weeks there. We had a really good time, but when the time ended, we had to fly back home. I was a little bit scared. This time, I decided to remove my belly ring. We came to the airport about 3 hours before the departure time. At the entrance to the airport, we saw an older woman who had a large card with the word written on it with capital letters, Poland. So I came up to her and I started to speak in Polish. She smiled and we started to chat together. When we were just about to leave, she asked me if I could take a box of chocolates with me and give it to her son in Poland. He was supposed to meet me at the airport because she would phone him. And of course I agreed. And then it started again. At the custom clearance, everything was okay. I came through the metal detector and nothing happened. My passport was alright. I was almost free when the custom officer asked me about the chocolates. I said that it was given to me by the lady at the entrance and that her son is going to take it back at the airport in Poland. The custom officer asked me to open the box. I didn't want to agree as it was not mine, but I had to. It turned out that inside there were not chocolates, but cocaine worth $20,000. I was taken to jail. I spent 2 days there and then everything had been explained. I could come back home and the lady and her son were caught and also taken to jail. I don't have to explain why this was the worst holiday ever. Let me be honest with you guys. I'm not a fan of first dates. I've only had a couple of good first dates, others are plain disasters. However, from time to time, I like to get on Tinder and swipe between pictures. Tinder dates always turn into funny stories, sometimes even spooky ones. My guy best friend Ryan and I decided to go on a few Tinder dates just for the fun of it. Before we went out, we would always agree on a safe word, and that word was hot dog. A text saying, "Hey, can you pick up some hot dogs on the way?" Or something along those lines basically meant, "Can you call me and pretend there's an emergency so I can get out of this situation without being rude?" We had a lot of safe words meaning different things, and had an unspoken rule that every time we were on a date, we would let the other person know. I met this guy called Brandon on the application. We had a few good chats and decided to go out for brunch. I called Ryan and I let him know that I'll be having brunch with this Brandon guy. I'm not a supermodel, but I'm a bit too picky when it comes to first date outfits. I dived into my closet and decided to wear a bright pink off-shoulders blouse and a tiny little white skirt. And of course, my signature mermaid hue high heels. Brandon texted me saying he knows of a nice Italian restaurant. Despite the fact that we were going out for brunch, I somehow agreed to Italian. The guy comes to pick me up for our brunch date. He looks nice with lots of black on. He says he needs to make a stop along the way. I couldn't really seem to disagree. I mean, he clearly forgot to buy me flowers. So I say it's fine and he can make a stop along the way. He pulls up to a gravesite and I see people and I'm like, okay, maybe he's picking something up from someone, or maybe he works here and needs to do something. What was really going through my mind though is what the heck is he doing and why is he bringing me to a gravesite on a first date? I just waited in the car, especially since there's mourning people nearby and I'm wearing a bright pink outfit. He gets out of the car and opens up the passenger side door. I tell him something along the lines of, "I don't want to draw attention to myself and I'll just wait here." And he says something along the lines of, "Don't worry, you look great. They will love you." Despite my pink outfit and my high heels, Brandon was very well built. He was very tall and had broad shoulders. One could easily tell that he is into martial arts. So I wasn't very worried about my safety. However, I was really worried about his mental health. I'm not even kidding. I was so very curious about what on earth were we doing there at 10 a.m. on a first date. And who is they, as in, they love you. Okay, so the next part is a bit hard to define whether it was creepy, surreal, or a prank show. It was his mother's funeral. I stood next to a group of weeping people watching as my date's mother was lowered into the ground. Needless to say, it was really, really awkward, especially since he kept trying to hold my hand and nuzzle me for comfort. It's a first date, for God's sake. I waited for the service to be over, as I didn't want to be rude to the grieving people or to the dead woman. And then I texted Ryan, hot dog. So Ryan called me and pretended to be my landlord and told me that my apartment was flooded. I quickly apologized to Brandon and called an Uber. While I was waiting for my Uber to arrive, Brandon kept on holding my hand and literally begging me to stay a little bit longer. He also said we could still go out for brunch, but I politely said we could reschedule for another time. I think his cousins or something were standing too close. He told them that we've been dating for a few weeks and they should talk me into staying. I was so glad that my Uber finally arrived. I hopped inside the car like a freaking ninja. I called Ryan and asked him to come over. We stayed together, and honestly, I've never laughed as much as Ryan made me laugh that night. And guess what? Ryan and I realized we were actually in love a few weeks later. We gave up online dating and we've been together ever since.
One nice thing about success is seeing all your friends and family being so proud of you and your accomplishments. This mutual respect and appreciation is what real friendship is all about. My story is about success and friendship, and also when two friends become incompatible and no longer go hand in hand. My name is Sherry, and I'm 21 years old. I had a friend named Margot. She wasn't just my friend, she was my best friend, my sister. She meant the world to me. We were alike in so many ways, even in our hobbies, our dreams. After my dad's death, Mom and I moved to Margot's neighborhood, since her mom was my mom's best friend. I was only 3 years old at the time, so Margot and I practically grew up together. At school, we shared the same classes, studied together, and even partnered as lab partners. She and I both aspired to become pharmacists. I struggled through high school, but made it through with Margot's support and encouragement. I didn't have as much freedom and independence as she did, because my mom was too overprotective of me. It was at this point that my story really began. When I decided to join the Faculty of Pharmacy, Margot asked me why I chose that major, and I told her that my dad had died of a malignant disease that had no cure, so it was my dream to find a cure for it, to save lives. I studied hard and successfully enrolled in the Faculty of Pharmacy. Margot was very happy for me, and she promised to keep me focused on discovering that cure for Dad's fatal disease that I so passionately sought. I asked her to stay by my side the whole time, and she was happy to do so. The Faculty of Pharmacy was located abroad, so outside my country. I would be independent, free of Mom's smothering control. Frankly, I looked forward to it. Margot and I found a place to stay near the faculty, at a youth hostel with a group of girls from different countries. Unlike me, Margot was able to easily make friends with them. Our studies weren't easy at first, but we worked hard and muddled through. I was so excited to delve into my research and learn as much as I could. I queried instructors and doctors constantly to expand my knowledge. This was my beginning, and Margot stood by me the whole time. Eventually, we graduated from the faculty and launched our careers. I started at one pharmaceutical company, while she started at another. We were now competitors of a sort. In preparation for my private research, I rented a flat near my company. Margot did the same near hers. She was always asking me how my research was going. She knew I was trying to develop an antibiotic to cure Dad's deadly disease. It wasn't easy, though, because the body's immune system attacked the antibiotic and destroyed it before it could destroy the diseased cells. I had to discover a neutral substance that the immune system wouldn't attack, so that the drug could penetrate into the body far enough to find and destroy the diseased cells via chemical interactions. My first research paper was rejected, but I kept trying, and with each attempt, I would discover something new. During that time, Margot was also busy with her work. One day, she called me. She was crying because she had been fired from her work. They accused her of stealing an important research. I told her that she was so proficient in her work that she should not be sad.
but rather should try and get a job at my company. I told her that I would recommend her to my manager. She hugged me and thanked me a lot, and said, "You really are the best friend ever, Sherry." The next day, I told my manager about Margot and said that she was looking for a job and was waiting outside. He interviewed her and gave her a job. I was so happy now. She and I were working at the same company. Margot continued asking me about my research, and I gave her occasional updates. I was hesitant to tell her too much, but then again, she was my best friend after all, so I invited her to my home to tell her about my research. Margot wasn't as happy as I thought she would be to hear about my progress, but I figured that was because of her recent firing. My personal research took all my time. It was even more important than my work. One day, when I reported to work, my manager told me that they didn't need me anymore, that I was being let go, fired. I was shocked and asked why. He said that I was spending too much time at home doing my private research and too little time at work. He told me he had had several letters delivered to my home, instructing me to come back to work, and that I hadn't answered him, and that I had failed to come back to work. He told me that my roommate, Margot, had received the letters on my behalf, and had promised to deliver them to me. I was shocked. I told him that she never said anything. Returning home, I confronted Margot and asked why she didn't deliver my boss's letters to me. She acted so apologetic and said that she had received the letters, but she had been so busy that she put them aside and forgotten about them. I forgave her, but I felt that she wasn't being completely honest with me. I brushed it off and told her that being fired would simply free up my time so I could spend more time on my private research. Days later, Margot called me and asked me to come celebrate with her. When I asked her what the occasion was, she said that she had gotten a promotion and taken my place at work, my former job. I was happy for her, but at the same time, I felt that there was something wrong with these circumstances, and that feeling seemed to be growing. Time passed, and my experiments finally met with success. I had succeeded in finding the drug that could destroy the diseased cells. I was over the moon. Dad would have been so proud of me. I called Margot and told her about my discovery, and she said, "Oh, Sherry, you did it! You discovered the cure!" I told her that I planned to present my research to another pharmaceutical company soon, one that was better than my previous one, the one that had fired me. She acted happy for me, but had a strange look on her face. Then I felt sleepy, and I said goodnight. She said she would be staying up for a while, so I just went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I found my research area in shambles, and my research data was missing. I woke Margot up and told her that someone had stolen my research last night. She said that's not possible. Who else knew about your research besides you and me? And I said, maybe it was my former manager. Maybe he had somehow guessed that I had made a breakthrough. I don't know. I called the police and reported the break-in and theft of my research data, but they couldn't find any evidence as to who the culprit might be. I returned to my home country disappointed and dejected. I got another job at a company near my house. Many months had passed. I wasn't in touch with Margot anymore. We kinda lost contact somewhere along the way. Then, one day, Mom was watching TV when she suddenly saw a program that was going to discuss a new drug that would treat and cure Dad's malignant disease. They were going to interview the discoverer of the miracle cure. I sat down enthralled. I had to watch it. When the interviewer introduced the guest speaker, it was Margot. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was her. She stole my research. My so-called best friend betrayed me, and I had treated her like a sister. It cut me deep. I took legal actions against her and got my research back and received credit for finding the cure, so that was all okay. But the one thing that could never be fixed, for which there was no cure, was the former relationship between us. She had stabbed me in the back and destroyed my faith in humanity, and I don't think I could ever find a cure for that.
You know, sometimes the truth is even stranger than fiction, especially if you had a dark secret in your life that would put you in danger if it were exposed. Such was my case, and this is my story. My name is Charlotte, and I'm 17 years old. I live with my mom. My dad passed away before I was born, so my mom had to raise me all by herself. My mom knew everything about me. My school studies, my friends. She had certain rules that I was supposed to follow, like eating outdoors was forbidden.
and I can't be friends with someone unless she knew everything about them first, and so on. I thought these rules were somewhat paranoid, and I asked her why she placed such restrictions on making friends. Her reply was simply that you can't trust anyone nowadays. But that wasn't a very satisfying answer. And when I asked her what it meant, she didn't say anything further. As I was growing up, these rules mystified me even more, and I couldn't help but wonder if they had anything to do with my father, whom I knew nothing about. Mom always said he was a troublemaker, and she told me that everything would be clear to me in time. One holiday, I joined a new band. We held a lot of concerts. It was the best. I was good at playing music and singing. When we went camping, we met some students from other countries. We made a lot of new friends and had fun together. We even had a chance to increase our band's fame and reputation. After our first performance at camp, an Asian girl approached me. She hugged me, saying, "Charlotte, I missed you a lot." Taken aback, I asked, "Do I know you?" She surprised me again by saying, "Don't you recognize me? I'm Mary, your friend." I smiled and replied, "You must be mistaken. I don't know you." After insisting that she was indeed my friend, she excused herself and ran back to join her friends. Weird. Though, now that I think about it, I have often had an eerie feeling that someone was watching me wherever I went. I tried to shake off this feeling many occasions, but I never could. I would just tell myself that it must be my imagination. That night, we all went into the jungle. It was a jungle tour. It was very dark, and I got separated from the group and found myself alone, surrounded by trees. I called out to my friends, but no one heard me. Suddenly, I bumped into someone, a girl it seemed, and I apologized. When I turned around to look at her, I was shocked to see, well, myself, or my double. It was as if I was looking in a mirror. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm Charlotte," she replied simply. "That's impossible. I'm Charlotte," I said assertively. "Are you with us here at the campsite?" "Yes," she said. I asked her which way back to the campsite. She pointed in one direction and we headed back. As we were walking, her phone rang. It was her father. He was worried about her and was just making sure she was okay. We arrived at our tents without incidents, and I said, "It was really nice to meet you, Charlotte. I'll see you tomorrow." I felt a strong connection to the girl for some reason. Then I realized that I had forgotten my bag, and I went to get it. And again, I had that ominous feeling that I'm being watched. Suddenly, something hit me on the head. When I woke up, I found myself sitting in a car, surrounded by people wearing sunglasses, and I was really frightened. "Who are you people?" I demanded to know. "And what do you want from me?" One man told me that my dad was the reason they kidnapped me. When I told him that my dad had died a long time ago, he just laughed. Then he sprayed something on my face and I lost consciousness. When I woke up later, the other Charlotte was tied up beside me. One of the men seemed confused, seeing two of me, and he asked his boss which of us was the girl they were looking for. Suddenly, I heard someone shout, "Freeze! Don't move!" The police had come. They came out from the tree line. Surrounding the car, they arrested the men. Then they untied us both. Someone appeared looking very worried. The other Charlotte started coming too and asked where she was and what was going on. Then she saw her dad and she ran to him. Her dad then looked at me and asked for my name and my mother's name. When I told him, he said he knew who I was and said to send his regards to my mom and to tell her that he was still keeping her secret. Then he gave me a medal and hugged me, saying that he wasn't sure if we would ever meet again. I was still staring at him, looking confused, so he smiled and he asked me where my father was. And I told him that my father was dead. And then he said that that was their agreement. He and my mom, that he was only trying to protect me and the other Charlotte, who happened to be my twin sister. He said he got into some trouble in his line of work. Some people threatened to kill us, so he and my mom decided to split us up. "She took you, and I took your twin sister," he said. "We did this to keep you safe. I named your twin Charlotte, just the same as you." I was still feeling a bit overwhelmed at this point. This was preposterous. I couldn't believe it. Suddenly, I heard someone calling me. "Charlotte, wake up! It's time for a trip. You must have been having a nightmare because you were screaming. I woke up to find myself in the tent with my friend. When I went outside the tent, I stopped. Right in front of me, staring me in the eyes, was a girl who was my mirror image. I don't follow the news much. International crisis, crimes, kidnapping, all these things just fill me with dismay. It's as if our world is a dangerous jungle. And I don't like that feeling, because I'm a peaceful girl who likes to avoid trouble. Little did I know that my peaceful world was going to be shaken by one of these sad events. I'm Marcia, and I'm 18 years old. I live with my parents and my little sister Marilyn. My mother often warned me to be alert and avoid dangerous situations. She told me that peaceful people can live in a peaceful world if they choose to do so, but that wasn't entirely true. I was at a friend's birthday party once, and we were laughing, eating, playing, and having a great time. I wasn't paying attention to my phone much, but when I chanced to look at it, I saw that Mom had called me over 1,000,000 times around midnight. She was clearly worried about me being out so late, so I decided that I needed to rush home. I was afraid to take a taxi alone, but I needed to hurry home, so I walked out to the main street, which was very dimly lit, and saw a taxi nearby. But when I got closer to it, I saw that all its windows were tinted, and I didn't feel at ease. I made to look for another one, but then the taxi driver opened the front door and smiled. His elderly age and his friendly smile disarmed me and gave me a lulling sense of security. So I asked him to take me to my home, and I jumped into the back seat. He asked me why I was walking alone on a dimly lit street that late at night, and I told him about the party and my losing track of time. He warned me not to walk late at night again, because that was a dangerous time to be about. He asked me if I had heard about the serial killer named Bradley. I said that I did, but that I didn't know what he looked like. At that point, he laughed, and I heard the 4 doors suddenly lock themselves. He looked at me and said, "My name is Bradley. Now you know what I look like. It's so nice to meet you." I screamed for him to stop the taxi and let me out. He stated simply that the simple mistakes can have the largest impact on our lives sometimes. He boasted that I would be a perfect addition to complete his skull collection. In a panic, I grabbed his seatbelt and began strangling him with it. I demanded that he stop the car, but he refused. I began choking him harder and harder until he eventually lost control of the car. The car careened off the road, flipped a few times, and landed upside down. Luckily, I was still conscious and was able to get out of the overturned car. He tried to grab me as I was crawling out, but I managed to escape. I ran back up the main road and flagged a car carrying a family in it. Once I reached home, I relayed my horrendous experience to Mom, and she took me to the police station. After listening to my story and my description of the guy, the police promised to investigate and to catch the criminal as soon as possible. That experience scarred me for life, but I know now that I have to be strong if I am to live on. Some days later, I received a message from an anonymous sender that said, "Be ready for the next ramble. You haven't seen the last of me yet."
There are different kinds of pranks. Some are funny, some are boring, and some have serious consequences. My small innocent prank turned into a horror movie. Let me tell you why. My name is Anita, and I'm 14 years old. I live with my parents and my brother Victor. Victor is 3 years younger than me. We are also close friends. I love reading, writing stories, and most of all, playing pranks on people. I just love to do it. Victor was the cowardly sort, afraid of his own shadow, so I always played pranks on him. His terrified reactions always made me laugh. Whenever he would try to play a prank on me in retaliation, though, I would always see through it immediately. My parents used to spend Halloween at my aunt's house. So, one day, I decided to scare him by dressing up like a ghost and hiding in his closet. When he came home and called for me, I didn't reply. He entered his room and opened his closet to hang his coat, only to be confronted by me jumping out and screaming "boo" in his face. He leapt backwards, wide-eyed and terrified. He screamed like a girl. I was rolling on the floor, laughing. If he wasn't such a coward, I wouldn't have had any fun at home. "One day," he joked, "your pranks are going to be the death of me." When he turned 17, Victor received a scholarship to the state university. I saw him off with tears in my eyes, hugged him, and gave him a present marked "Don't open until you arrive at your dormitory." Shortly after he arrived, he video called. He had blue powder all over his face and looked hilarious. He said, "Very funny, ha ha ha. You have to stop these pranks, sis. We're too old for this stuff now." Oh, how I missed him. I laughed. With him gone, everything was so boring. When October came and Halloween was only a few days away, the doorbell rang, and I opened the door to find a letter lying on our doorstep. I opened it and found a picture of Victor. His face had been beaten black and blue. He looked horrible. I opened the letter and read, "Victor got involved in drug dealing and now owes us a lot of money. If you don't pay off his debt as soon as possible, we will kill him, and you too. Do not call the police, or he will only die sooner." Panicked, I called the thug's phone number, written at the end of the letter, but there was no answer. Victor was such a sweet and innocent guy. I couldn't believe he had gotten himself involved in drug dealing. I thought of calling my parents, but I decided not to, because they would definitely call the police. So I spent the next 2 days thinking. Then, the home phone rang, and I felt my heart sink to my feet. I slowly picked up the receiver. "Do you have the money?" the caller asked in a cold voice. "I need more time. I don't have that much money," I pleaded. The voice replied, "You seem to think we are joking. Okay, the next photo we send you will be that of your brother's dead body." He said that. Then he hung up the phone. My stomach wrenched. I felt sick and tried to call my parents, but I couldn't reach them. The next day, I heard a knock on the door, and when I opened it, there was another note lying on the doorstep. It read, "The angel of death comes today." My parents were at my aunt's. I was alone and didn't know what to do. I closed all the windows and curtains and locked all the doors. I turned off the lights. At the stroke of midnight, I heard a noise outside my house. I peeked out a window and saw a man, all in black, in my front yard. He was walking towards the back of the house. Shortly after that, I heard the back door open. I ran and hid myself in the closet. Eventually, I heard my bedroom door open slowly. I heard footsteps walking around my room, as if the intruder were searching for me. Suddenly, my closet door opened. I panicked, pushed the masked intruder, and dashed out of my room and down the hall to the dining room. Victor's decapitated head was on the table. Oh my God. My last thought before I fainted was that if the drug dealers were going to kill me too, just as they promised. Goodbye, life, I thought. When I woke up, I saw my parents and Victor, dressed in black. They all began laughing hysterically. Angry, I snapped. "What's going on? Why are you all laughing? This isn't funny." Victor confessed between laughs. "It was just a prank, sis. And you should have seen the look on your face when I opened the closet door." From that day on, I never played pranks on anyone ever again.
I love going to the gym, but I remember one particular traumatic moment when I was in high school that made me stop going to my favorite gym. One morning, not even a couple of minutes after arriving at the gym, I was approached by 2 policemen. The gym attendant said these police guys have been waiting for me for a couple of hours. All my gym friends saw what happened. "Are you Natalie?" one of them asked. Yes, what can I do for you?" I said in confusion. "You need to come with us to the police station for some questioning," he said firmly. I dropped my mouth wide open. It was the first time I got invited to the police station ever. I was shaking, but I tried my best to hide it. They might think that I'm guilty of whatever it is, or I really did something wrong. I wanted to ask if I'm in trouble, but I remained silent instead. I'm getting more and more afraid of them as we get nearer and nearer to the police station. I'm sure you're all wondering what happened. Trust me, I had no idea back then. I was as confused as you are. Stick around and I'll tell you the details. Anyway, make sure you've already hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications. Let me tell you my story by starting at the beginning. I have a boyfriend. His name is Marco. We've been together for a year now. He is the most popular guy not just in our high school, but in other schools as well. And he's so popular because of how good he is at playing basketball. He's the team captain of our school, and a lot of basketball agents come to our campus to check him out. And now that we're seniors, a lot of schools are offering him scholarships. And me? You know those chick flick movies where you see a really pretty woman walking along the school halls? Tall, blonde, beautiful, her hair bouncing, and her body looks really hot, so everybody's just looking at her, simply getting amazed by her beauty. Let's say, like Regina in Mean Girls. Well, I'm nothing like that. I'm just a plain Jane. Maybe now you're wondering how Marco and I met. Well, we've been neighbors ever since we were 7. I remember the day when they moved into the house next door. My family invited his family over for dinner, and that was the first time we ever hung out together. Hi, he waved at me. I tried to say hi back, but I couldn't get my silly shy self to speak, so I just waved at him. After dinner, they went back to their house because his mother said they still need to unpack their things. I went to my room and opened the window for some air, and to my surprise, I saw Marco. He looked at me and smiled. Our bedroom windows faced each other. That's when we started to get really close. We would talk till the wee hours of the night and no one would really notice. It is safe to say that Marco and I started as friends, but just last year, he confessed his feelings for me. And to be honest, I feel the same way about him. And so we started dating. Secretly, though. Everyone in his life, including his parents, his sports mentor, his agent, and his friends, do not like the idea of him getting a girlfriend. Especially if that girlfriend is me. His mom treats me like her own daughter, and she's always reminding Marco to treat me like a sister. As early as 18, Marco already had a sports mentor and an agent. That's how good he is. His future is secured already with this just one mistake, and it could all be ruined, so they're just being very careful about his career, and that I understand. But I've been a very supportive girlfriend. Marco is a great guy. He's always there for me. We go together to the gym most of the time, and we hang out like we're just friends. No one would really suspect anything because people know that we're really friends. And I do not mind being kept a secret because I know one day everything's gonna be fine. Time will come that he would be able to hold my hand in public. One time on our way home, Marco told me something that made me so happy. I love you, Natalie. I like no one but you, he said. I love you too, baby, I said before hugging him. But sometimes I cannot help but get crazy. I see a lot of girls in school trying to get his attention. I cannot even count how many girls are trying to flirt with him all the time. One time, Mandy, the cheerleader at school, tried to kiss Marco in front of me. I almost stripped her eyes out at that time, but I kept my cool. I just quietly planned my revenge. During gym class, Mandy was taking a shower, and I took all of her clothes and threw them in the garbage bin. That was harsh, I know. But I trust Marco. I know that he loves me. He's also always trying to assure me how much he loves me. And I believe him. But things started to change. Since we were 15, we promised each other that we would go to the same college together. Both our parents could afford to get us into college, and we made a vow that we would still be together when the time comes. And that promise became stronger when we became a couple. But 6 months ago, my father got into an accident, and he had a spinal injury that made him have difficulty walking. My dad stopped working. I had to apply for a part-time job because my mom could not afford our daily expenses on her own. And due to that scenario, my college fund got in danger. College is expensive. That's why I'm helping my mom save up for it. I have 3 part-time jobs which make Marco and I hang out a lot less than we used to. We barely see each other anymore. He's too focused on his basketball games because he's at the crucial season of a make or break moment with his agents. This period is the decision making phase for his basketball career, so he's working double time. Whenever we hang out to watch a movie, either he falls asleep halfway or I do. A few weeks before prom, Marco and I decided to go together and tell everyone that we're actually dating. After high school, no one would even care. Also, we're very positive that our parents would approve of us. One time while we were at dinner, he was holding my hand while we were discussing our future in college. Baby, have you decided what college you're gonna choose? I asked. He told me that he chose the most expensive college in his choices. And that got me upset. How can I go to that college? Even if I work twice as hard as I do now, I can never afford that one. That night, we had a fight. After that, our fights became more and more frequent. We rarely hang out, and when we did, we fought all the time. But I love him, and I know he's got a big game coming up. I don't want him to lose focus because of our fights, so I called him and said, "Okay, baby, good luck with your big game tomorrow." "Aw, I love you, baby. Go to the gym right now. I really miss you, and I want to meet you in our special place," he said. There's an area at the gym where we always give each other a hug. I hurriedly went to the gym, but my mood was changed when I saw Mandy throwing herself at Marco again. I got so pissed. When I was near enough, I heard what she was asking Marco. "Can you be my prom date?" Marco was just trying to be nice, so he just smiled and said that he's not even sure if he would go to prom. "Of course he will," Mandy said. "I think I know what will change your mind." She tried to kiss him. Mandy tried kissing my boyfriend in front of me. I grabbed Mandy's hair and a big cat fight started. "Get off of me, you loser," she said. People at the gym managed to stop us, but my blood was still boiling. I was not thinking clear. I was just so freaking mad that I gave Mandy a big, solid punch in the face, but she dodged, and my fist landed on Marco's face. Next thing I know, I was at the principal's office. I almost got expelled, but I got into detention instead, making me miss one of my part-time jobs. When I reported to my part-time job at the coffee shop, my boss got really angry at me because it was an opening and I should have been there. And so he fired me. I tried to ask for a second chance, but he just yelled at me, so I just left. I wanted to cry, but it would do me no good. I went home and I gave my mom a super tight hug. I did not notice that we had a visitor. Apparently, it's the lawyer of Marco's family, and they're filing a restraining order against me. Marco was still in the hospital because I broke his nose. His parents and agent were so angry because of what happened. He would miss his big game. Although I'm sure that there would be a lot of chances for Marco, a missed chance is still a missed chance. I felt so bad. I went to my room. It's the only place where I could talk to Marco and apologize. But Marco was not there. Maybe he's still in the hospital. I don't know. I fell asleep, and after a couple of hours, I got up, wrote a note, and as I looked at Marco's window, I saw that it was closed. Maybe his mother did put up a curtain or something. I tried calling him, but my number was blocked. I also got blocked from all his social media. 4 days before prom is Marco's birthday. I really would like to see him and be able to greet him, but I have a restraining order, so I cannot exactly just come near him. I don't want to get arrested. That is not gonna look good on my college application. There would be a big party at Marco's house, and I really want to see him and be able to greet him, so maybe I would just sneak into his room. The night came, and there were a lot of popular kids in Marco's house. I wore a black hoodie like a criminal, and so far, I was successful. Nobody has seen me yet. I was friends with one of their maids, and she let me sneak into the kitchen door, and while the people were getting crazy drunk, I slowly went into Marco's room and waited for him there. I was glad when I heard someone open the door, but I was shocked to see Mandy and Marco together. I'm not sure if he was drunk or drugged or whatever, but I'm sure that it was not the Marco that I know. Nonetheless, it hurt. And stupid me, I hid under his bed. While they were having their passionate moment, I was there. I heard everything. When the coast was finally clear, I snuck out of that house, went home, went straight to my room, and bawled my eyes out until I fell asleep. The next day, I decided to go to the gym to get some happy hormones pumping up. I'm not the type of person to sulk and whine around. Yes, I'm sad, but my life does not need to revolve around misery. I also figured that maybe the gym owner could give me a part-time job since I already lost mine. But then, when I arrived at the gym, two policemen approached me. The ones I was telling you about at the beginning of my story. They asked me a few questions about my whereabouts the night of Marco's birthday. But I refused to answer because I knew I could get arrested for violating my restraining order. I would like to answer when my lawyer is present, I said. The next day, my mother accompanied me with my cousin, who's a lawyer, and she helped me answer the questions where it would not compromise any legal issues whatsoever. I started wondering why I feel like they're making too much of a big deal out of this restraining order. But then I was struck to my very core to find out that Mandy was dead. Her body was found lifeless floating on the surface of Marco's pool. The mental images of Marco and Mandy together kept flashing through my head, so I unconsciously yelled, "Stop!" My lawyer said that they consider me as one of the suspects because few people, including the maid, testified that they saw me sneak into Marco's room that night despite the restraining order. But I didn't do anything, I swear. They advised me to stay inside our house and not go anywhere, even at school, as long as the case has not been sorted out. A few hours later, I was in my room, and I saw Marco opening his curtain, and he was signaling to me as if asking for help. Then I heard 3 gunshots. I saw blood on his window. "Marco!" I screamed in disbelief. I hurriedly went downstairs, and I saw the police and an ambulance. I asked my mom what happened, but she was speechless about the scenario. I went outside and my mom was not able to stop me. I ran inside Marco's house where his parents saw me. The police tried to stop me, but his parents signaled to the police that it was okay. I tried to go into Marco's room. The moment he saw me, he gave me the biggest and tightest hug ever. I saw his agent dead and the police carrying the body away from Marco's room. Marco was shaking. I waited for a couple of hours before we could talk. We were having coffee, both covered in blankets, outside at their porch, and he started telling me what happened. "Listen, I'm really sorry that I got with Mandy. I was drugged," he said. He told me that he figured out his agent was a double agent. That man was just trying to ruin his career because he's actually the agent and the father of the basketball superstar of our rival school. His agent accidentally killed Mandy when she did not agree with the plan of blackmailing Marco with his private pictures. Mandy destroyed her phone where the scandal was, and the agent started strangling Mandy till they fell into the pool. She didn't know how to swim, and the agent just left her there to drown. I felt so bad about what happened to Mandy. But on the bright side, the agent paid with his own life. Marco figured it all out because he would not let me go to jail. When the agent knew that Marco already knew the truth, he pulled out a gun, but Marco was able to alert his parents to call the police. Marco also explained to his parents that I'm his girlfriend and not a crazy stalker. We're just hiding it because we don't want anyone to get upset given what's at stake about his career. His mother apologized to me and asked if we could leave the past behind. And all I said back was, of course. The following night, we all had dinner together. Marco's family, my family, just like old times. And they officially accepted me as his girlfriend. Also, they've legally lifted the restraining order. Prom night came. Marco and I had the time of our lives. He introduced me to his friends and teammates as his girlfriend, and that made me so happy. We danced all night and made sure that we created great last high school memories. We ended the night passionately. Well, you know what happens during prom nights. And I do not have a single regret about giving it to Marco. The next day, we went to our favorite coffee shop, and we had a long talk. We decided to break up. He obviously had a great future in basketball waiting for him, and he does not need me to slow him down. Someday, if we're really meant to be together, I'm sure love will find its way to bring us back together. But for now, let's be realistic. I do not have enough money yet for college, so I decided to sit it out for a year while I'm working hard for my tuition fee. Marco goes to an Ivy League school where his basketball career got so much stronger. Don't worry, we're still friends. We always see each other during Thanksgiving and other family occasions. Last year, I even met his new girlfriend when he brought her home for spring break. It kind of broke my heart, but I'm good now. When Marco and I broke up, I realized how much I sacrificed for his career and his future. And it was as if mine did not equally matter. When I asked myself what I want to become and which course I should be taking, I did not know the answer. So I focused on myself until I figured out that I wanted to become a lawyer. I wanted to help someone like me someday and prove that someone is indeed innocent. It's been a couple of years since Marco and I broke up, and it's the best decision for both of us. Right now, I am building my future at the university I've chosen, away from Marco's shadow. I also became a member of Alpha Kappa, the most popular sorority at the campus, and am making the most out of college, just like I wanted to.
I am addicted to food. I suffer a lot. I need help. I've tried to give up, but I fail every time. Hamburgers. Who can give up eating hamburgers, especially with barbecue sauce? I didn't mind this kind of addiction, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me begin by introducing myself. I am Patricia, 15 years old, living with my parents and my brother. I lead a quiet life. No interests, no hobbies, except for eating, that is. Food is my faithful friend. It never leaves me. It is my partner, my soulmate. But having food as your soulmate has insidious side effects. A dark side, if you will. It denies me a healthy life, robs me of the energy to play, and causes me to sleep excessively. I would much rather stay at home with a bag of potato chips than go out and exercise. My soulmate ultimately betrayed me, though, last Thanksgiving at my granny's home. She lives in a state nearby. Granny was a clever doctor and an excellent cook at that. She could conjure up something really delicious. On that day, she had prepared barbecue turkey with nuts and other secret recipe ingredients. The taste was so great, as if it had descended from heaven itself. I felt like I was fighting a food war, and I had to win at all costs. I ate and ate and ate. I don't know why, but I just couldn't control myself. I attacked that turkey like it was the last on the planet. But every culinary war with a worthy adversary, such as the barbecued turkey, has its own unique type of casualties. Suddenly, I found myself unable to breathe. I fell to my knees and passed out. The turkey had won. I woke up later in the hospital, though, still clinging to an unfinished turkey leg. The doctor told me that I was gaining way too much weight. He said that I should be put on a diet. Diet? Man, how I hated that word. It hung over my head like the sword of Damocles. It meant depriving me of my passion, my reason for living. I considered eating vegetables in small amounts to be the worst form of cruel and unusual punishment, the worst form of torture imaginable. Imagine thinking of a wonderful, greasy, cheese-laden pizza with all the toppings and then suddenly opening your eyes to find a healthy green salad bowl. But I had reached a turning point in life. One day, my brother was playing on the street, while I was sitting at home gazing longingly at a tempting piece of cheesecake, just sitting there, taunting, daring me to eat it. I struggled mightily to resist the urge, but in the end I succumbed and wolfed it down like a starving animal. Shortly afterwards, I began feeling dizzy, but I was unable to call for help this time, and then I passed out again. I was taken to the hospital. While lying in the hospital bed, half conscious, I overheard the doctor say to someone, "She needs to stop eating or it will be the death of her." I thought to myself, whoa, death? So I made up my mind right then, right there. I resolved to fight a new war, a war against my appetite. On our way back home, I told my father that I wanted to see a nutritionist. He was delighted to hear that. Later, at the clinic, the doctor welcomed us in. She told me how to overcome my eating fetish. She gave me a strict diet regimen with a schedule full of healthy meals. I kept telling myself that winning this war was possible. I simply had to be patient and persevere. I stuck to the strict diet and did some physical workouts. My parents supported me wholeheartedly. I was enthusiastic. I can totally do this. A week passed quickly, and I eagerly visited the doctor to receive some good news. When the doctor weighed me and told me that my weight hadn't changed at all, I was crestfallen. She looked at me and asked me, how was this possible? I told her I didn't know, because I was following her diet thoroughly, though it did require a tremendous effort on my part. Another week passed, and again I went to the doctor. The results were the same. She said to me, "Patricia, are you sure you're following the diet I prescribed for you?" I said yes. She sat there wondering. Then she told me with a puzzled look on her face, "It's odd, but your weight is increasing, not decreasing." This unexpected piece of news mystified me. Another week passed. No change. The doctor was nonplussed. I returned home with a dejected look on my face. My father asked me what was wrong. And when I told him, he laughed. Do you believe that? My father actually laughed at my predicament. I was furious. He gestured an apology with his hand and then told me that it was my own fault. I was puzzled. What are you talking about? He told me that I had been sleepwalking to the refrigerator every night and eating everything in sight. I was taken aback. I couldn't believe it. "Stop acting like you didn't know it," he said. "You must have been awake." I replied, "No, Father, I'm not acting. I was truly unaware that I've been sleepwalking and eating in my sleep." But now that we've finally solved the mystery of the increasing weight, we returned to the doctor with this new information and told her the situation. She laughed and told me that my discipline had denied my body the food it craved, but my brain had refused to cooperate and had overridden my will by urging me to eat in a subconscious state. She told me not to worry, though, that she could treat that. Armed with this knowledge and her support, and the support of my family, I felt that I could finally win this war.
I don't know where to begin. I don't want to live alone. I'm fed up. I need someone to talk to laugh with, to play with. I've been lonely since birth. My name is Bella, and I'm 10 years old. And this is my story. I lived with my parents in a nice, quiet neighborhood. My father was an engineer, and my mother was a housewife. Father used to travel a lot, but my mom always stayed home with me. Father was always busy. Whenever I asked him to play with me, he'd play with me for a while. Then he'd get a phone call and leave me by myself. Mother was always worried about me. She feared everything on the street, from friends to neighbors. My neighborhood didn't have any kids for me to play with. My parents used to fight a lot. I often saw Mother with her face colored blackish blue. Whenever I would ask her about it, she wouldn't reply. I didn't have any friends because Mother didn't want me to have any. I guess she was afraid they would hurt me. I don't know. One time, my parents were sitting together, and I asked Father why I didn't have any brothers or sisters. He told me to ask Mother, but Mother would just sit there silently. without answering. Later, there came a time when father grabbed mother and began beating her. I tried to pull him away from her, screaming, "Leave her alone! Let her go!" He slapped me hard, and I fell down. The last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was my mom screaming. I woke up later in the hospital to see my mom crying. She asked me if I was okay, and I nodded. When we returned home, my father wasn't there. I asked Mom where he was, but she simply said that he left on a very long business trip. I was feeling a little sad, but Mom surprised me with a doll. This was the first time that Mom had ever given me a doll. She said that doll would be like my little sister. I hugged it tightly and said to it, "Nancy, you and I are going to be the best sisters ever." Mom often left me with Nancy when she had to go out to do business. It was okay, though. I felt that Nancy could understand me whenever I spoke to her. Time passed quickly. One day, Mom came home tired and went to sleep on the couch. I made a tent in my room where I collected all of my toys and played with Nancy. I was speaking to Nancy and telling her how beautiful she was and how I felt lucky to have her as a sister. Then I asked her, "Nancy, do you know why Father left us?" Miraculously, Nancy answered me, saying, "Father left you because he never really loved you to begin with." I was shocked and took 2 steps back. Then I said with a trembling voice, "Nancy, you can speak?" Nancy answered and said, "Of course. Can't all dolls?" From that moment on, Nancy and I lived in our own private little world. We didn't let anyone know about this. It was our secret. Once, when we were sitting alone, Nancy said to me, "Bella, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" I asked. Then she said the strangest thing. "You have to leave this world because you deserve a better one." That didn't make sense. Actually, it felt more like a threat. It frightened me, and I called for Mom. When she came in, I told her what Nancy had just said to me. She replied saying, "Nonsense, Bella. Nancy is just a doll. She can't talk. Maybe you're just tired. Get some sleep." So I tried to sleep, but Nancy wouldn't let me sleep. She left me alone until midnight, then she woke me up. She put her hand over my mouth and whispered, "Please listen to me. Don't scream, okay?" she said. "I know all your fears, your father's cruelty, your loneliness, your love for me, how your love and belief in me transformed me from a toy to a sentient doll. I really love you, Bella, and I want you to be happy." Her words calmed me down, and I said, "You're right, Nancy. So what do we do then?" She explained her plan to me. "In 2 days' time, we'll run away from home to a place called Toyland, where we'll meet some great friends." Whenever Mom was busy with work, I would speak and laugh with Nancy. And whenever Mom would enter the room and ask me who I was speaking to, I would laugh and point at Nancy. I could see in Mom's eyes that she was beginning to worry about me. One day, as Nancy and I were preparing our stuff to escape, we were looking at a map we had prepared. Then, unexpectedly, Mom came into the room. She saw the map and asked me about it. I looked at Nancy, and she gestured with her eyes that I shouldn't say anything. Seeing this, Mom took Nancy and threw her into the trash can. I screamed and pleaded. That was all I remember.
Don't we all feel special sometimes? I grew up in an orphan house. I'm not trying to pretend that there was anything special about it, but I grew up with this nagging voice inside my head telling me how special I am and that my life will eventually turn upside down. It turned out I was not being delusional or anything. What happened to me was every foster child's dream. If only I knew what my future held for me. My mom, dad, and twin sister committed suicide in 1992. I was saved by my extended family, only to get abandoned later. I was disowned, not because 2 of the wealthiest families in the city couldn't raise me, but because I was a curse for their reputation. My mom and dad were not married, and that brought them so much shame until they took their own lives. Fast forward few months later, one day I woke up at a children's home. I'm an orphan now. I have absolutely no memories of my parents or even my twin sister, but I do remember my extended family very well. They gave me up when I was 6 years old. My uncle is an extremely rich businessman. He was never really bad to me. In fact, he put me in what you can call a fancy home. Although he promised to visit me every weekend, he never did. I was put in a medium-sized room with 4 other girls: Rosaline, Claire, Bella, and me, Rachel. They were all dressed in clean nightgowns, but they were all the same color, pale green. Mrs. Milton, our guardian, gave me a similar gown to put on. It felt as if I was admitted into kids' military. Our hair was always put up in a tight bun. We all looked the same. Mrs. Milton was not the kindest person you could come across, but she wasn't evil either. The house was divided into 2 sections, one for the boys and one for the girls. The only time we met the boys was in the outside building, which was some sort of a school. We took a few classes every day, and to be honest, we had some really good teachers. I always sat next to a boy called Nate. I thought he was super smart, and he always helped with my math homework because numbers were never really my field of expertise. We eventually became really good friends. Whenever I went back to the room, all the girls were too occupied with their toys, and they were all good friends already. It felt like I was an outsider. However, a few months later, I became the alpha of the group. Don't get me wrong, this is not another Oliver Twist story. We used to pull pranks on each other all the time, and we had a really good laugh. I mean, being in a foster home is not exactly a vacation, so we made the best out of a bad situation. When the girls would go to sleep at night, I would go fake sleeping until Mrs. Milton had gone to sleep as well. Then I would stare out that tiny, teeny window and start counting the stars one by one. I named one after my dad, one after my mom, one after my twin sister, and finally, one after Nate. I would stay up all night long daydreaming until I fell asleep. Mrs. Milton would wake us up around 6 a.m. to have breakfast and go to class. It went on like that for years and years. Every day seemed exactly like the other, except on the weekends, which wasn't really much of a weekend. It only meant we were allowed to eat dessert. I have always been an extremely curious little girl, and the reason Nate and I grew so close was because he was a curious boy as well. We had no idea about the outside world. We had so many unanswered questions, and sometimes we would make up answers to tame our brains. The girls had relatives visiting them during the weekend, but I would stay in my room. Sometimes I cried, and sometimes I shut my eyes close and tried to imagine what my mom looked like. One day during science class, Nate asked me who visits me on the weekend. I never said anything back. I pretended that I didn't even hear him. But in a moment of extreme confusion and sadness, I wrote something down on a piece of paper and passed it to him. It said, "Let's get out of here." We were 12 years old at the time. I didn't care about the consequences at all. All I cared about was getting outside of here and exploring what was happening in the outside world. I wanted to go back to my uncle, even if he didn't want me. Nate looked at the paper, folded it into half, and he freaking swallowed the paper, and he just nodded his head at me. I wasn't sure what he meant by the nod until at midnight. While I was looking at the stars I befriended for years now, I heard the slip of a paper under the door. I quickly got up and the paper said, "Meet me at the school building in 5 minutes." I slowly opened the door and ran downstairs. Nate and I stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. We started discussing a runaway plan. But seriously though, what could 2 kids do to escape a fully guarded huge building? We were smarter than any of you would think. For the next week, we studied every movement happening around the place. When security guards changed their shifts, which teachers left class early, we even memorized the times when Mrs. Milton had to use the bathroom. We had a solid plan. At the end of the week, on Friday, we had history class, and the teacher always left a few minutes early. At the same exact time, security guards changed their shifts, and Mrs. Milton took about 3 to 4 minutes to come downstairs and walk us back to our rooms. That was it. That was the moment I have been looking for all along. We passed by the guard's back and we ran and ran like there was no tomorrow. After a few blocks, we were out of breath. We were two kids dressed exactly alike with no money and no place to go. But we couldn't stop, not after we finally did it. We kept on walking and walking until it was night. I looked up at the sky and I could not believe my eyes. The sky had endless stars. I let my hair down and got rid of that stupid bun I've had for years. I decided that Nate and I could go into a shop and ask for a suitable job that could offer us a place to live and food. Yes, I was that smart, and I still am. So we went into a grocery store owned by an old lady. We told her our story, and what she said back was, "I need to call the police." And so we begged and cried and begged, and the lady had a big heart. She offered us some sandwiches and said we could help deliver groceries around the block. We immediately agreed. Nate and I had to sleep on a blanket inside the store every night. It was not a great situation, but we loved that sense of freedom. We felt like we were hero kids with superpowers. We stayed with the old lady for what seemed like a year. If you haven't guessed it by now, I was in love with Nate. I had our wedding planned inside my head, and although he never said anything back, I knew he loved me even more. One day we heard that old lady talking to an officer who was looking for two lost kids. We grabbed all the cash we could and ran through the back door. I know it's inconsiderate to rob the woman who provided for us, but there was no other way. We quickly stopped the cab and asked the driver to drive as far as possible. He gave us a weird look, but when we showed him the money, he started driving. At this point, Nate held my hand for the first time ever, and he said, "We'll be okay." I felt my heart melt to the ground, but traffic noise brought me back to my senses. The cab driver was driving funny, but none of us was really familiar with driving, so we never really paid much attention. I looked at Nate and he said, "We need to find my uncle. He's rich, he can help. You can hide in my room. Or he can even adopt us, I don't know." My voice was shaky. Nate replied and said, "Hey, calm down. I promise we're going to be fine. Rachel, we have each other. This is all that matters. And I will help you find your uncle." I didn't hear the rest of his words. I woke up in a hospital bed. I screamed at the top of my lungs. A nurse came in and I said, "Who are you? Why am I here? I need to leave right now. Where's Nate?" The nurse gave me a pill and some water. She said, "Calm down. You'll be fine. Your friend is fine. You got into a car accident. What's your name?" I pushed her hand away and refused to take the pill. "My name is Rachel and I need to see my friend right now." The nurse just left me. Then an officer came in. He started asking questions and I kept asking to see Nate. I never answered any of his questions. I asked him to call the nurse again and she came back. I asked her to help me sit straight because I could barely feel my legs. Maybe I'd been sleeping for too long, I don't know. She just stood there. I looked down and I didn't have legs. What happened?" I asked. "The accident happened, Rachel," the nurse replied. "Now I'm a crippled orphan?" No, that couldn't be true. I'm not sure why, but I was super calm, and I asked, "What happened to my friend?" "He is okay. Where are your parents?" I stared up at the white ceiling and never said anything back. I don't know how, but it was suddenly next day morning and the officer woke me up. I told him the whole story, and I described my uncle and his business name. I needed all the help I could get, but no one was telling me anything about Nate. The doctor explained that I will be able to walk again, but it might take up to a few years. Later that day, my uncle came. I had an ocean of mixed feelings, but my eyes were stoned. I couldn't shed a single tear. The first thing he said was, "Why did you do that to yourself, honey?" He dared to call me honey and to blame me for his own doing. I half smiled and said, "The doctor said I'll walk again. Have you heard anything about my friend?" He told me that Nate had a brain concussion and he's in a coma. And that was when my stone eyes melted. I felt guilty. It was me who made him run away. If it wasn't for me, maybe he would have been fine now. "Uncle Todd, could you please call in the doctor for me?" I asked. The doctor was very understanding. Although he did not have a full picture of what was going on, he explained to me that Nate will be fine, and I believed him. My uncle paid for my surgery and for Nate's stay as well. How confusing. If he had such a big heart, why did he admit me to a foster home? I lost count of the days. I wished I was back at the orphanage sitting next to Nate while he helped me with my homework. A month passed by, and Nate was doing a lot better. I saw him a few times, and I was able to walk a few steps with the help from the nurses. My uncle visited from time to time, and I could tell he was trying to make it up to me. But wasn't that just a bit too late? 6 months later, we were both sent back to the orphanage with reports that Nate is at a risk of a brain stroke, and that I couldn't walk or stand for too long. My uncle offered that we stayed at his house, but we both knew he never meant it. Back at the orphanage, we were treated differently. It wasn't just the same. Things have changed. Mrs. Milton had quit. The new guardian was called Mrs. Buffy, like the one from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Let me tell you that that woman was not kind. During break time, Nate and I would discuss what we wanted to pursue as careers, because we only had a few years left here, and then we could just leave without having to run away. Nate wanted to become a programmer. The guy was a true genius, and he wasn't so sure of what I wanted. But if you guys still remember the beginning of my story, I knew I was destined for something special. Mrs. Buffy caught us exchanging love letters, and Nate and I were forbidden from sitting next to each other in class. Well, except during history class, because the teacher didn't really care much about anything. We were also expert sneakers by now, so we managed to steal a kiss every now and then. Things were starting to get better. I could walk better, and Nate could talk better, because he had a problem with stuttering. A year passed by, and we were about to leave the orphanage and go to college in less than 6 months. One day during break, Nate started throwing up. Mrs. Buffy refused to even call a doctor. The next morning he couldn't speak at all in class, and he started throwing up again and again. I ran up to Mrs. Buffy to take him to the hospital, and she replied, "We can't afford hospital, Rachel," and looked the other way. "Call my uncle right now," I screamed at her. "Fine," she said in a very careless voice. My uncle came, and Mrs. freaking Buffy refused that I go with them. And so my uncle took Nate to the hospital. After 4 hours, my uncle came back, and without my consent, he demanded I leave and go home with him. I was so concerned and just went with him. I kept on asking questions, and he said nothing back. He parked in front of his mansion, and he said, "They tried their best at the hospital. I'm so sorry." And he hugged me for the first time ever. I pushed him back and he said, "What does that mean? Do you mean that Nate is gone?" And then my uncle started crying. He invited me to go inside, but I refused. No, no way. Nate couldn't just leave me like that. I walked away. I sat on the pavement recalling all the memories we had together. I looked at my artificial legs and kicked them so hard, but I didn't feel a thing. I lived with my uncle for a year, on the condition that I will pay rent until I could move out. What if Mrs. freaking Muffy had called the doctor? Wouldn't Nate be here right now? I had nightmares about killing her every single night. I got a part-time job as a teacher. I paid my rent and saved the rest for college. I finally knew what I wanted to study. I wanted to study journalism. I worked day and night until I could afford college. I sent hate letters to Miss Buffy every now and then. As soon as I graduated, I landed a 1 in a million job. I worked for the biggest newspaper in town. I moved out from my uncle's, but we are on good terms. 2 years later, I went back to the orphanage, only to find out that another kid had died due to lack of responsibility. Although Mrs. Buffy was old and even grumpier now, it didn't stop me from getting back at her. I wrote every detail of Nate's story and submitted it to my boss. He never even knew I grew up in an orphanage. The story went viral. I was even interviewed to share more details on television. Finally, Mrs. Buffy went to prison after a long trial. Oh, I could almost hear Nate smile in heaven right now. I may not have legs, and I may get bullied every now and then, but I have Nate living inside my heart. After things went viral on social media, I was able to get enough donations to open my own foster home in Nate's name, and to forever honor his name. See, I told you, I was destined for something extra special.
Hi, my name is Laura. I'm 23 years old, and I teach art. I recently got married to the love of my life, Norman. I considered him my friend, my brother, my son, and my husband. We loved to prank each other, even after we got married. For instance, one time I turned off all the lights in the apartment, dressed up as a monster, and scared the living daylights out of him when he came back from the store. Another time, he damaged my car. I put mayonnaise on his toast. I did worry sometimes that our jokes might go too far. I mean, he did get really mad at me once. He stopped talking to me for 2 days, even though I apologized profusely many times. After that, our pranks sort of stopped. I figured our pranking days were over. About a month later, I returned home to find a letter on the floor. I opened it and read it. "If you don't pay us 100,000 by Friday, we will kill Norman." I smiled. Norman was pranking me again. When he returned home, I hugged him and showed him his prank letter. He read it carefully, and his brow furrowed. He appeared seriously frightened and swore that this was not part of any prank. He told me that we needed to leave town as soon as possible. I asked him why, and he told me that before he married me, he had stolen a gold statue from a motorcycle gang. I asked him why he couldn't just return it with an apology, and he told me that the statue was worth a lot of money and could make us really wealthy. That night, an armed masked burglar broke into our apartment and confronted us with a gun. He said to Norman, "Hello, Norman, long time no see. You need to choose between the statue or your wife. Choose now." Norman was hesitant. Then he steadfastly said, "I can't give up the statue. Take my wife." The masked man turned towards me. He pointed the gun at me in a threatening manner. I was frantic. I was staring at Norman in shock. Suddenly, the masked man ripped off his mask. It was Keanu, Norman's brother. Norman sat down, laughing so hard he could hardly stop to breathe. Between laughs, he said, "This is payback for the last prank of yours. I was so mad at him that day, but it's all right. He doesn't know what I have planned for him."
Hello, I'm Sarah. Ever heard of a phobia before? Don't worry, it's not contagious or anything.
It just means you're scared of something in particular. Places, people, things. I have a phobia, but I don't like to talk about it. And I definitely don't want to be seen in that state. I was in my second year at college. I had been very busy that semester because we had a lot of assignments, and it was fine. I mean, I liked studying and completing tasks, but I was never a nerd or a geek. No. I like to dress nicely too. I have my own fashion and style. It wasn't easy making friends though. There were two types of people at my school: smart nerds who couldn't care less how they dress, and complete airheads who dressed nice. I didn't fit in either one of those groups, so I basically kept to myself until one day I got assigned to do a task with a girl and a boy, Jane and Kyle. They didn't look nerdy at all, and I thought to myself, oh great, looks like I'll be doing all the work. But when we started talking about the project, they didn't just sit there or toss ridiculous retorts. All three of us were having an actual conversation about the topic. I was so thrilled. It finally seemed like I belonged somewhere. We became friends and did everything together. We could tell each other anything. Well, not everything. I had one secret from my friends. I never told them I had a phobia. Anyway, a year later, Jane moved to Germany with her parents. She was going to finish college there. So it was just Kyle and I now. All through college, we were the best of friends. We even did our graduation project together. On graduation day, Kyle and I were supposed to go out for dinner. He wouldn't tell me where, said it was a surprise. And what a surprise it was. He had picked the highest tower in the whole city to eat dinner at the very top. I don't have a problem with high places in particular. In fact, I'm sure I'll love the view if I ever make it to the top. No, I had a problem with the elevator. A phobia, to be precise. So we were standing at the base of the tower, and Kyle was happily listing all the great features and restaurants up there, but I didn't hear any of it. I was too busy fretting, frozen to the spot, desperately trying to find a way out of the situation. I couldn't say no to Kyle, who was all excited to go up the tower, so I clenched it in and tried my best to stay calm. We got in the elevator, and the doors shut. I couldn't control what came after that. I was terrified, screaming and shouting hysterically, banging on the walls, then falling to the ground. Of course, I don't actually remember any of it. Kyle told me later on. The last thing I remember was the elevator doors shutting close. When I came to, I was at the hospital. Kyle was sitting by my bed looking worried. When he saw that I woke up and that I was feeling fine, he started laughing at me, saying, "Why didn't you tell me you had a phobia?" I felt ridiculous and started laughing too. And then, out of nowhere, he proposed. It was his plan all along, although he pictured it at the top of the tower. All that happened 3 years ago. We're married now, and we have a baby girl. I'm being treated for my phobia. It's not completely gone, but I'm way better now. Apparently, hiding my problems never solves them. I'll have to face them, sooner or later. Being famous is a dream for most people, but achieving this particular dream is not easy. It takes a lot of perseverance, and maybe even some luck. Listen to my story. My name is Rona, and I'm 18 years old. I live with my mom and my sister. My dad passed away long ago. We live in a very poor neighborhood, where drug dealing and death are everywhere. My mom is a nurse, but even so, her salary is barely enough to make ends meet. I have always wanted a better life. I often admired famous people, like singers and actors, and I imagined myself living in their world of fame and glamour. What I would give to be a famous person like them. I had a dream. I wanted to be a clothes designer or a fashion model. I would draw different styles of clothes and stand in front of the mirror, posing like a model. I just knew that my clothes would fit perfectly. But here's the thing. I wasn't thin enough to be a model. This was the obstacle between me and my dream, so I decided to go on a diet while searching for a job. One day, I read the news about some famous clothes designer and learned that a fashion show was going to be held near my area soon. Within a week, they would be holding an audition to select some local models, so I saw an opportunity to enter the competition, get selected as a model, and make my dream come true. I did everything I could to lose weight. When the audition day came, I tried to get in the fashion show, but the security guards wouldn't let me pass because I looked too ordinary. So I went home, dressed up like a princess, and then returned, looking more important. I was allowed in. I saw many fit girls with nice slim figures. They were so beautiful and seemed so enthusiastic about the audition and their chances of being selected. I felt like I was watching a fashion magazine photo shoot. I signed up for the audition. One by one, the girls performed in front of the judges. Some came out sad, and some came out ecstatic. After seeing this fierce competition, with many beautiful girls being turned down, I lost hope and turned around to leave. That was when I bumped into a woman. Her name was Linda. I excused myself and said, "I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention." Linda replied, "It's okay. Are you one of the competitors?" "Yes, I wanted to, but seeing all these beautiful girls, I don't think I have a chance. Goodbye." "No, you shouldn't give up so easily," she said. Her kind manner persuaded me to turn around and try out for the audition anyway. As I walked onto the stage, I noticed that Linda was one of the judges. She winked at me as our eyes met. I did my best. Once my audition was over, I looked at Linda, and she smiled and gestured with her head that I had done well. However, one judge told me that my performance was good, but my figure was not. I needed to lose more weight. Linda told me that I was put on a list of potential models with the stipulation that I could re-audition if I lost more weight, so I buckled down and really hit the diet hard. I began starving myself. Mom felt miserable watching what I was putting myself through. I managed to lose about 40 kilos. Unfortunately, I had become so thin so quickly that my health began to suffer. I started feeling depressed and even got dizzy at times. When the next audition day came, I entered the audition room and once again met Linda. She looked at me with worry on her face and said, "What have you done to yourself?" "You told me to do my best, so I did," I said. I walked onto the stage. The judge who had told me to lose more weight saw me and was shocked. He asked me, "How were you able to lose so much weight so fast?" When I began my performance, my weakness caused some dizzy spells, which caused my modeling motions to be unsteady and awkward. Linda was clearly worried. As she watched my performance, as if she expected me to fall at any moment, the judges gave me poor marks, and I was rejected as a potential model. I was greatly disappointed because I had tried so hard. I said to the judges, "But I followed your instructions and lost more weight." The one judge said, "Yes, you lost more weight, but then you let your performance suffer as a result." Then I passed out and woke up later in a hospital bed. Mom and my sister and Linda were waiting at my bedside. I asked them what had happened. "You're too weak. You fainted on stage," Linda explained. Suddenly her phone rang, and after she answered and listened for a moment, I heard her say, "What? Oh no." After she hung up, I asked her what had happened. She told me that the plane carrying the judges and the competitors had crashed. There were no survivors. They would have to start the whole competition and selection process all over again. Though I was saddened by the tremendous loss of life in the plane crash, I chose to interpret this as a sign from above that I had another chance to achieve my dream, that I should not give up. With Linda's guidance and advice during my rehabilitation program, I was able to achieve an optimum weight with good health. Fate and my perseverance had given me a second chance, and I would not waste it. I am now ready and determined to try again. I don't really like Indian movies because the actors are always overreacting, and the movies are not logical at all. But this is just my personal opinion. However, I've discovered that there are stories stranger than Indian movies. Let me give you a real-life example. I'll tell you a story about a young woman named Samantha. Samantha was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and green eyes. She lived with her grandmother after her parents died in a horrible car accident. The whole country read about it. She had many friends, and all the neighbors liked her. They considered her the most beautiful girl in town. Many had proposed to her, but she didn't care much for them. One day, Samantha was walking alone down the street after visiting one of her friends. Suddenly, she had an eerie feeling that someone was following her. She began running and crying for help. Her follower began running and stopped her. He was an ugly man, pointing a knife in her direction. He asked her to hand over her purse. She threw it at him and made a run for it. The man said wait and made to stop her. But another man appeared out of nowhere and punched the thief, who fell unconscious. The brave and good Samaritan picked up Samantha's purse and handed it to her. He was very handsome, with green eyes, soft hair, and an amazing smile. He escorted her back home, and she felt that he was her knight in shining armor. She went inside and hugged her grandmother tight, who was a little surprised but smiled. Samantha was so happy that she gently pulled her grandmother to her feet, and they whirled around and danced playfully. The very next day, she was surprised when she answered the doorbell. Steve, the tall, handsome man, was standing there, holding flowers. He proposed to her, and she said yes. Thus began their love story. Then one day, Samantha was standing in the kitchen preparing dinner. Steve and her grandmother were out, but they were supposed to be back soon. Samantha had everything ready, and she set the table. The house door opened, and Steve walked in. Samantha went to greet him, but she felt dizzy and fainted. Steve quickly took her to the hospital. The doctor congratulated Steve, saying that he was going to be a father. Steve was ecstatic, but Samantha was not. Instead, she was shocked and nervous. She said that she was too young to have kids, that she wasn't ready to be a mother. Steve was taken aback and said, "But why? Don't you want him?" Things were different from that point on. Samantha tried to get an abortion several times, but Steve was always stopping her. She couldn't accept it. She blamed Steve, but Steve couldn't understand her. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Samantha was with her grandmother at the supermarket when she saw a small boy run onto the road. Fearing he might get run over by a car, Samantha quickly pulled the boy off the road to safety. The boy's mother saw what happened and thanked Samantha, feeling so grateful and relieved. Samantha was crying at the moment and replied, "No need to thank me. I'm going to be a mother like you soon." For the first time, she was beginning to feel real affection for the baby. "Forgive me," she silently thought to herself. She tried to contact Steve many times to tell him that she had finally accepted. She was ready to become a mother, but he never responded. Finally, the day had come. Samantha went to the hospital to give birth. After the surgery, she was very tired. Nevertheless, when she woke up, she immediately asked for the baby. Her grandmother handed her the child. It was a daughter, and she was so beautiful. The nurse tried to take the baby out of her arms, but Samantha refused, wanting to hold her for as long as she could. The next day, Samantha heard a big commotion, and she had a feeling of dread that something bad had just happened. It was confirmed when she saw her grandmother's face. She asked what had happened, and her grandmother told her that a child was missing and had apparently been kidnapped. Samantha's pale face slowly pleaded, "Please don't tell me that it was my daughter." When her grandmother nodded, Samantha broke down and began crying and wailing in pain. The nurses tried to calm her down, and when she did, her grandmother came over to her and handed her a note. It had been found in her missing daughter's hospital crib. It was in Steve's handwriting. It simply said, "If you don't want her, I do." Then Samantha fainted. For many years, she tried finding her baby, but couldn't. Steve and her daughter had vanished into thin air. She felt as if time had stopped for her, but Steve didn't feel that way. He raised their daughter into a beautiful young woman. He named her Margot. Whenever Margot asked about her mother, Steve would always tell her that her mother was dead, but he often told her stories about her mother and how much he had loved her. Margot's intuition, however, told her that her father wasn't being completely honest with her and that he was hiding some big dark secret. One day, Steve fell ill unexpectedly. He called Margot to him and told her that he was very sick and felt that he was going to die soon. He said that he wanted to reveal a secret that he had long kept from her, that her mother was actually alive, and that her name was Samantha. He told her that he had kidnapped her from the hospital at birth because her mother did not want a child. He regretted it and asked Margot to forgive him. He gave her Samantha's address, and soon after, he died. After his death, Margot decided to go looking for her mother. I am Margot, and I am now standing at my mother's address. At her front door, I cannot predict my mother's reaction when she answers the door and I introduce myself as her daughter, but I'm going to hug her and tell her that I've missed her for so long. He was a dream, the future, or so I thought. But my love was cursed right from the start. Sounds a bit confusing, right? Let me explain. But first, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Carolyn. I was a dreamer. I dreamed of a good, warm, stable, successful life. I wanted a good job. And I wanted to travel around the world a bit with Helen. She was my best friend. We virtually shared the same dreams and hobbies and interests and lifestyles. We've been friends since we were kids. People often thought that we were sisters. I did too, in fact. She even got jealous if anyone tried to get close to me. Every day, Helen and I worked a little more towards our dreams. Once, when Helen and I were traveling with some of our friends, we had a problem with the hostess on the plane. A gentleman intervened and cleverly solved our problems. His name was Danny. I liked him. A lot. I thought about him often, but whenever I talked to Helen about him, she told me that he was not as amazing as I seemed to think he was. Coincidentally, I met him again at a party of a mutual friend. We talked together till daylight. I told Helen about our encounter, and she expressed her wishes that my love story would have a happy ending. I similarly told her that I hoped she would find the love of her life someday too. Everything would be okay, we figured. Then, one day, I received a letter in our mailbox. It was in weird handwriting, as if the writer had written it with a trembling hand. I opened it curiously. It said that my love for Danny would become a curse if I didn't give him up and get him out of my life. What nonsense, I thought. Whose idea of a silly joke was this? I immediately called Danny and Helen to tell them about the letter. Danny laughed, but Helen was worried and suggested that I should be careful from now on. That same day, Danny had a horrible car accident, but fortunately he wasn't hurt. A detective investigating the case determined that his car brakes had been tampered with. In another incident, a car almost hit me, but it swerved away at the last minute. When I mentioned this incident to Danny, he tried to calm me down and told me to just forget about it. He gave me a beautiful bracelet as a present and proposed. We got engaged, and I couldn't have been happier. I wanted to show the bracelet to Helen, but somehow I seemed to have lost it. I couldn't find it anywhere. Anyway, when I told Helen about his proposal, she was thrilled for me. I spent days shopping for just the right wedding dress. I was so busy with preparations that I forgot all about the ominous letter. I went to the wedding hall early to make sure that everything was ready and prepared. Helen was helping me, and Danny kept calling me to make sure I was all right. Suddenly, the lights went out. I called out to Helen, worried that she might have tripped and fallen when the lights were out. When the lights came back on, Helen had fainted, and my dress had disappeared. I screamed to the ceiling, "What do you want from me? Leave me alone!" Suddenly, Danny appeared out of nowhere and asked me what had happened. I told him then and there that we must break off our engagement, otherwise the curse the letter mentioned might injure someone or cause someone to die. Then Helen came too and tried to calm me down. She told me to go to the car and that she would get our stuff and follow me. I loved Danny and wanted to marry him, but now I was seriously worried that this curse threat might actually be real. Helen came back carrying a bag and a large suitcase and told Danny not to worry, that she would drive me home and then call him to tell him that we had arrived safely. I was still crying, and Helen was trying to calm me down. When we arrived home, I noticed something strange. Helen was carrying a bag that was partially open, and I glimpsed a piece of clothing stuffed into it. It looked exactly like my dress. I opened the bag and found that it was my dress. I confronted Helen and demanded to know how my missing dress ended up in her bag. I clearly caught her red-handed, and she was unable to answer coherently. I realized at that moment that the source of the so-called curse was Helen. "Helen," I said, "how dare you do this to me? I thought we were like sisters to each other." She replied icily, with a glare that I saw for the first time. She said that she fell in love with Danny just as I did, but he chose me instead of her, and that she hated me for it. She said she won him over and got him to love her instead. Then they both tried to scare me into calling off the wedding so that she and Danny could be together. There are no words to describe how I felt at the time. I replied in a similar tone. I told her that I don't ever want to see her again, or Danny. Neither of them mattered anymore. I never did see Helen or Danny after that day. I'm on a Caribbean island now, sipping on a cocktail. I read in the paper that Danny and Helen had announced their engagement.
I'm thinking about what wedding present I should give them as a surprise.
Before I got on the plane from Barcelona to Tokyo, I emailed the friend I was staying with. Please do not be shocked by my appearance. I look a little bit different. Also, I won't have any money when I arrive. So if you can help me sort it out, that would be great. The stitching on my face looked like someone had killed a black spider but left the corpse there. My appearance was shocking. I gasped with horror whenever I accidentally glimpsed at myself in the mirror. And that was before I even registered that it was me looking back. My face got worse on the plane ride to Tokyo. Whether it was just the cabin pressure or the time that was the bruises take to bloom, well, my friend meeting me at a hotel in Tokyo blanched when he saw me. My eyes were black and swollen shut. One side of my face was also swollen and bruised, and a long line of black, badly stitched thread ran down my right temple to my brow. I had been assaulted and robbed in Barcelona a few days before, which resulted in 2 black eyes, a swollen jaw, and a fractured skull, now dented and stitched together by an exhausted intern who would never win a prize for the neatness of his craft work. My friend in Tokyo was a lawyer who dealt with the complexities of transitional airline leases and wore tailored suits. We made an odd-looking couple as we went from bank to bank with my passport, trying to get money out or get money wired or just access it somehow. In his flawless Japanese, he negotiated on my behalf as I stood there, my face a grotesque mask. But each time we were rebuffed. In a chilled Starbucks, my friend brought me an iced coffee, which I drank through my straw, and my jaw still hurt, and said, "The people in the bank probably think I beat you up, and I'm trying to drain your bank accounts. That's what it looks like." We tried one more bank, and when they said no, tears burst with some difficulty from my swollen eyes. And the sight might have been so weird and sad that they finally said yes. The rest of the time in Tokyo, I didn't leave my friend's flat. I was anxious and exhausted, and had started to dream of the assault and shattered and jumbled fragments. In the day when I should have been exploring Tokyo, I lay on the couch in the cool dark flat and watched reruns of the Dawson's Creek.
Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans, after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself.
I think the person who invented horror movies must have had real psychological problems. What benefit is there spending hours watching vampires, werewolves, decapitated heads with arteries spurting blood? Horror movies are just a waste of time, and I'm sick of constantly seeing them on TV. Do you think these horror movies affect our heart and nerves? Will they somehow bring about our deaths in due course? My name is Melina. I am 15 years old. My mom died during childbirth when my brother Martin was born. It was my responsibility to take care of him. My friends called me Melina the Horrible because I really hated horror movies. Even if they only had a smattering of corpses, scary monsters, an insane madman wearing masks and stabbing people at random acts of cruelty. Creators of these movies had to be deranged. We really don't need those kinds of movies. There's enough cruelty and misery in the real world as it is. They did humanity no favor. My friends all made fun of me. They said I was just a coward. But that wasn't it. They just don't get it. It was impossible for them to change my mind, though, but they never stopped trying. Then, one day, I had to face a horror that was all too real. Before that day, I was preparing to submit a drawing for the school exhibition. I had worked on that drawing for more than 2 years. I wanted to win the Best Artist Award of the year. It was on this fateful day, after I had finished my masterpiece, that my nightmare unfolded right before my eyes. I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock. I had overslept an hour and was late for school. I grabbed a shirt that I had washed the night before, but it was still all wet. I tried to iron it, but I burned a hole in it instead because I was in such a hurry. I was literally running out of time, so I grabbed a t-shirt instead. I packed some breakfast in a bag, took my drawing, and ran to school. I was so focused on rushing to school that I didn't notice the mud pile up ahead, or the car coming from the side road, until it drove right through the puddle and splashed muddy water all over me. Well, at least my drawing was safe. Finally, I got to school, but the outside door was locked, and I couldn't get in. Frantic, I knocked on the door, and the school security guard looked at me through the small hole in the door. I told him that I was late for the exhibition and needed to get in quick. He looked at me with suspicion, but thankfully he opened the door. The principal was standing there with him, eyeing me through her thick glasses and asking me why I was so late. I told her that I was running late for the art exhibition and that I couldn't speak now, but that I would come to her office afterwards and fully explain myself. Without a moment to lose, I headed towards my classroom. Suddenly, I heard a sound as if the herd of elephants were coming my way. The lesson had just ended. Everyone was moving to their next class. I was like a pebble tossed in stormy seas, jostled right and left. Then the flood hit my drawing, carrying it downstream only to fall on the floor and get trampled on. I watched in shock as the whole disaster happened. I spent the rest of the school day sitting quietly at my desk. I didn't do any classwork, didn't feel like talking to anyone either. At the end of the day, after all the students had gone home, I was sitting alone in the schoolyard, watching the sunset. The guard told me that I needed to go home because he had to lock up. So, I got up and started walking. My home was a good distance away from school. I had no money for a bus or a taxi, so I had to hoof it home. Then, I came to a street that had been roadblocked. Workers were working on the road, and I couldn't pass through, so I had to take a detour around the roadblock and somehow ended up walking down a dark street. I didn't like dark roads. Maybe I should have just waited for the workers to finish their work. But then again, it would have been quite late. I continued down the dark road. I knew Dad would be worried.
so I hurried along. It was just a dark road, nothing to be afraid of. I mean, it's not like I believe in horror movies. What am I afraid of anyway? What's the worst that can happen? Suddenly, I heard a sound on the other side of the street. It sounded like a voice moaning in pain. I ignored it and continued on my way, walking a little more quickly now. Then, the moaning sound turned into a snarl, and I heard footsteps behind me. I sped up my pace. I imagined the dark shadow following me was gaining in on me, getting closer and closer. Could it be a ghost? A dead spirit? I stopped, and so did the footsteps. I felt their presence awfully close, so I turned around to face it. I saw a blue face, sunken shadows of the eyes, a stiff body, fangs in the mouth. A zombie! My brain screamed. I felt the blood drain from my face. I screamed. He snarled, and I ran. As I was running, another zombie appeared in front of me, trapping me between the two of them. What should I do? I had to do something. So, with all my strength, I swung my bag around in a circle and struck the one in front of me. He fell to the ground, and I ran past him, and I heard snarling again on the other side of the street. This must be a dream, I thought, but unfortunately, it was all too real. I kept running. Groups of zombies were gathering everywhere. Their appearances were disgusting and terrifying at the same time. I never want to see horror movies, but now they had decided to come to me instead. I ran, fell down, got back up, and ran some more. The street seemed really long. Suddenly, I saw a huge zombie crossing the road and getting in front of me. He was larger than the rest and had a large hunting knife stuck in his head. I screamed and fell down, slowly moving backwards, trying to keep my distance from him. Soon, I was surrounded by two of them again. This really wasn't my day at all, and it was going to end up with me being zombie meal. I thought of Dad and my friends and what they would think about me being eaten by the thing I despise most. Zombies broke out through the hedges and surrounded me. The big zombie pulled the knife out of his head and prepared to stab me, but I made the heroic effort and grabbed the knife from his hand and stabbed him with it instead. But the knife crumbled. It was paper, and unexpectedly, all the zombies gathered round and removed their faces, and all my friends shouted, "Happy Halloween!" I was angry and mortified, and relieved. They praised me for my courage and apologized for pranking me. They had told passers-by to avoid this dark street so that they could pull their prank. They even enlisted some volunteers to help them with the prank. I was still in mild shock, waiting for my breathing and heartbeat rates to return to normal. To comfort me, they presented me with a zombie doll as a memento of this night. After I finally got home, I told Dad about the whole thing, and he rolled over the floor laughing. I was so glad this day was over. I was right. None of it was real. Just that second, something made me glance at the zombie doll, and it turned its head to stare at me.